know your
tutorials straight from the source.
I literally drove up from Chicago and I arrived at Simon on
Exactly.
Good time.
I know exactly. I'm trying.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Thank you for your patience as we get situated here. The first order of business is public appearances. Barb, is this is all public appearances?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so Ryan, and if you don't know the drill, yep, Ryan Estrella, if you don't know the drill, it's 3 minutes. I'll time you.
Okay.
I'll try not to be
good.
too aggressive.
So this is about, there was a petition that was submitted. Do I need to? Okay.
Yeah, that's so that folks who are watching on YouTube or who are on the phone can
got
hear. It doesn't help us here, but.
So you got to speak up. Okay, I will make sure to do that.
Thanks.
So there was a petition that was submitted changing the Swan Creek neighborhood from Madison schools to Oregon schools. And I'm speaking opposing that because our children go to Madison schools and we love that they go to Madison schools. So I have a brief statement that I'd like to read if that's okay. And some of you, I apologize. Some of you got this information in your email, so I'm just reading it over again with a little extra stuff in there too. So as you may know, a petition recently was started in the Swan Creek neighborhood of Fitchburg, where my wife and I live, in order to switch the schools from Madison to Oregon. Our 3 children attend Leopold School, and we have been extremely happy with everything they have been getting out of attending Leopold, from the good quality education to the wonderful diversity of the student body, as well as all the amazing teachers and staff. Our children have benefited profoundly from their experiences at the school. We love Leopold. We moved into the Swan Creek neighborhood knowing specifically that the children would be going to Leopold, then Cherokee, and then West. This is always what we intended and what we wanted for them, to be around children of diverse backgrounds and to have opportunities that one might not find in other school districts. There are a number of us in the neighborhood whose children do attend or will attend either Leopold, Cherokee, or West, and we want our neighborhood to continue going to these great schools. We want you to know that the petition does not represent the opinions of everyone in our neighborhood. We just ask that you please think about the consequences of a vote to change the neighborhood from Madison to Oregon schools and the problems it would create not only for those of us whose children currently attend Madison, but also the consequences it would have on the schools as well. For those of us who do not agree with this petition, we are thinking about the bigger picture, not about our resale values. We are thinking about diversity and inclusion and the value and the experiences that all the children in these schools are getting from learning about each other. We are also thinking about the valuable resources that our neighborhood brings to these schools, including active and involved parents who are currently serving on the PFOs and who have connections to the broader community. We ask that you please keep all of these things in mind when you make your vote on February 25th. Lastly, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for everything that you do, for advocating for our schools, our teachers, our staff, and most importantly, our children. So, thank you. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ryan. Joel Turner.
Good evening. I'm sorry this is going to sound like the invasion of the Swan Creekers, but I promise you I'm going to be brief. I realize this is no longer on the agenda, but I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you this evening. As you said, my name is Joel Turner. I'd like to voice my opposition to the Swan Creek petition to detach from the Madison Metropolitan School District scheduled for a vote next week. I really just want to convey to the board that there are a number of homeowners who currently send their children to Madison or are thinking of doing so that are opposed to this reorganization. The other thing I just wanted to bring to your attention is that if you haven't done so already, please confer with the MMSD legal counsel, because it is my belief, and I understand that he's here, that the boundary agreement signed in 2002 provides a clear path for the appropriate disposition of the current petition before you. I thank you all for your hard work and dedication to our kids, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week when the petition comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Amy DeWald.
Good evening. I too am from the Swan Creek neighborhood. My name is Amy DeWald, and I'm a homeowner in Swan Creek in Fitchburg. Thank you, first of all, to all of you for your tireless efforts in the Madison School District regarding equity, regarding student achievement, and all the other things that the school district brings. I have 3 students in the Madison schools. We are in kindergarten, 4th grade, and 6th grade, so we've ventured into the middle school realm right now, and everyone loves it, and they're excelling and more than my expectations. I would like to say that I do not support the petition to detach Swan Creek from MMSD. As Joel just stated, there is a history on record as it relates to the attachment of Swan Creek neighborhood to MMSD. Prior to taking a vote next week on the current petition, I urge all school board members to review the boundary agreement that was signed in 2002. Also to review the summary of the decision made by the School District Boundary Appeals Board in June of 2003. And the minutes of the special meeting open session of the MMSD School Board from February 27th of 2006. All 3 of these documents confirm the attachment of the Swan Creek neighborhood to MMSD and deny past requests to detach Swan Creek from the Madison School District. I do not believe that the circumstances are any different now than they were in the past, and I urge you to uphold these previous decisions. Again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to a positive resolution to this matter when it comes to vote next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, Michael Jones.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So I'm here to just make a comment regarding the proposed budget and that I've seen. While I applaud any sense of increase regarding CC teachers and mental health supports, which I'm seeing being budgeted in, and I and my colleagues appreciate that. I also just wanted to kind of warn against the kind of sense of the vagaries that are going on within the budget. I'm particularly concerned about the lack of kind of planning that's going into saying we're going to increase staffing, but not really saying where it's going, that we're going to budget for certain increases without really discussing or really communicating any sense of what the programs are going to be, especially for alternatives, without really any discussion of transitions when it comes to our children. Case in point, I have a student on my caseload who I would consider a success case. He went from alternative programs to one-to-one off-site campus programming to all of a sudden now he's at our school on a reduced schedule, but actually taking regular ed classes and is excited about going to high school. When we transitioned him from his one-to-one support teacher to regular ed classes, we did not have any additional allocations, nor any additional extra support in the form of an SEA. As of right now, he is actually unsupported in a couple of his classes. So in order to meet his IP, I have to go in there and support him, which means that I lose my prep time. And although I appreciate the increases in the budget, I'm worried about the timeline when it comes to a lack of communication when it comes to planning or programming, especially next week when I'm meeting with East special ed teachers to talk about transitioning my 8th graders to East, especially when my 6th grade colleagues are meeting with elementary school teachers to talk about transitioning the 4 feeder elementary schools to Blackhawk. And it's kind of if there's an idea of adding money to the pot without any discussion of service delivery or planning around service delivery, that we're going to be running into the same problems that we're running into now. And a lack of planning and a lack of communication of those plans, or a lack of communication developing those plans with stakeholders, I think we're going to be at the same point in 2020 and 2021, which is all something that all of us at this table would agree we'd rather avoid, or rather, do a better job at. So, thank you.
Thank you. Peg Coyne.
Good evening. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I'm Peg Coyne. I'm a retired CC teacher, but I'm here today as an MTI staffer, and what I'm going to read to you are thoughts from the Special Education Subcommittee that is one of the groups that works with MTI or out of MTI. As you consider the recommendations from the ERS group to determine special education allocation for 1920, we ask that you keep these 4 items in mind. 1, at the November meeting, parents and students, teachers were here, and they spoke to you about their concerns on the level of special ed staffing throughout the district. We need additional CC teacher allocation to ensure caseloads are manageable and more SEA allocation to help manage our students who come to school with great challenges. Second point, the joint MMSD-MTI Safety Committee has given feedback and identified 2 items of highest priority. A, mental health supports for our students, and B, support for our highest needs students. And generally that falls in the special ed category. 3, we urge you to take a close look at ERS Group's recommendations on allocation to make sure that it's more than adequate to cover student needs and teacher workload. In particular, if it's a district priority to have all IEP paperwork completed on time, we need to ensure that CC teachers have adequate planning time to collaborate with colleagues, communicate with families, and are not reassigned to other duties like recess and lunch duty. Too often, CC teachers are called to provide emergency supports because there are not enough SEAs to provide assistance. These on-plan interruptions significantly impact teacher planning time, and it's stressful for everybody involved. And 4th, in the hope springs eternal category, if Governor Evers moves his budget to increase funds for special education forward, what impact will it have on MMSD? Will these funds be used to increase special ed allocation? And to wrap it up, we need a staffing plan that addresses the inequity among schools with different populations who are struggling with poverty or homelessness. And this is an aside, but I want to give a shout out to a group of people who work very hard. It's heartening to see that you are going to address employee injury protocol, and the driving force behind that was one SEA who gathered SEAs at La Follette and really got the ball rolling. And once again, from a grassroots level, it's really nice to see people banding together to take care of each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Peg. Jason Strauss.
Oh, be careful, be careful.
Thank you for your service to public education. In case you haven't heard the data already, first, 145 million out of 185 million of property owners signed the petition to switch Swan Creek, including the 2 apartment owners in our neighborhood. Second, there are currently 71 students enrolled in Madison schools, 60 of open enrolled route, and about 20 private school homeschool students, which means that less than 50% of the children in our neighborhood actually attend Madison. There are about 8 to 10 families who wish to remain in the Madison School District for various good reasons. They love their school, they love their teacher, and they wish to stay. For some, it's Division I athletics. For others, it's the convenience of work. We want to find a win-win situation for both districts that harms neither. But tonight I'm not going to focus on data, I'm going to speak from the heart. 20 years ago, I began my career as a student teacher at Madison Memorial with, believe it or not, Jay Affelt. That experience confirmed my faith in public education, and as a result, I've worn many hats over my 20 years and served as chair of many committees, mentoring, evaluation, Danielson, and currently I'm the chair for equity and advanced placement classes. I've dedicated my life to public education, but one of my flaws is I can't stand by when I see something in public education that doesn't make sense. Swan Creek is separated from the city of Madison by the Nevin Springs Wildlife Area and will always be. For us to get down to Madison, we got to drive down around or up and around. And as much as I love Madison, it is not known for its ease of parking or streets, especially in the wintertime. As a consequence, the families in our neighborhood associate more with Oregon than with Madison. So when you go into closed session tonight, I humbly suggest that you answer this question. When you look at the map, what boundary makes sense? Much has changed over 10 years. And what will serve the children of Swan Creek best? Do they deserve to go to the same neighborhood school with all of their friends? This border problem is not going to go away. The number of open enrolled students is continuing to grow and will only get worse. In a very short time, you're going to ask us to support a $280 million referendum for high schools that less than 50% of our students will even attend. And then we'll be asked to support 2 more referendums for an elementary school on the west side and on the east side. So when you go into closed session tonight, look at the map and decide what makes sense. We have already made our decision, and we're going to push for a logical border no matter how many weeks, months, or years it takes. Once again, I thank you very much for your dedication to public education. I hope you all continue your service, and if there's any way I can help and act as a communication between those who are in favor or those who are opposed, I'm more than happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Rubio.
Hi, so here we are again. I tried to write bullet points. As always, my life never is the way it should be, and I wasn't able to fully prepare to be here today. Bullying, it still continues at Badger Rock Middle School. The communication between myself and the staff is getting more and more difficult. Now it has been trickled down from just Mr. Tran to the staff. Ms. Gilman, I'm naming names, and Ms. Malig. We had a re-eval meeting for Joshua's 3-year re-eval, and they were resisting the entire way. There was an email sent, which I have forwarded to some people in the school district today, where it stated, this is what's going on, we don't understand. And then I've been met with resistance. Why are you going to come to me as a staff teacher and say, well, the 3-year eval is coming up. It's just a bunch of paper pushing. We're not contesting what the medical doctors are saying, the diagnosis is, but we feel we're not going to learn anything, so let's just skip it. That's how it was worded to me. I said, for now, let's just say yes, but I will have to address it with the team. The team said, no, let's do it. We had a meeting on Friday. Resistance all the way. We'll do it, but. Oh yeah, we'll do it, but. There's no buts. He's right here. I can't hide anything from him anymore because he's constantly hearing me, listening to all these people. Who are you talking to? I'm sending a message, honey. Hold on. It's ridiculous. And then they say, oh, we didn't say it. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And then when my family advocate tries to send an email to the staff saying, this is what I'm concerned about, but here's just the law, just so that you guys know, then we get this other huge email from the school staff, pretty much poking at my family advocate, trying to defend me and my son. That's not acceptable. I'm assuming by your words, and I hope that we can get along. Don't do that. If you're going to say it, if you're going to do it, then just do it. Don't say something and then turn around and do something else. And then they wonder why the colored folk are all, Mexicans and Hispanics, and we're not being heard. We're not. I'm not. He's not. He got punched in the face on Friday for no reason. A few weeks ago, he had an altercation, and again, here he goes. He wants to run in the street and kill himself because they attack him and he takes it so sensitive. There's not enough staff in the school. I'm getting pissed off, you guys, and I am sorry. But I'll be damned if this school is going to go down. It is a good school. And just because the principal wants to run my son off like he did in one of the IEP meetings when Amy Wiederrath was there, when I said Joshua has to get used to a new OT person, a new psychologist, and 2 new teachers. And then they ended up pulling one of the extra staff back because it's a small school. Now they're pulling out another one. Don't do this to him. I want you guys to put your students in that school and see how you guys feel about that education. It's a great school. And like everybody says, Madison Public School is great. Prove it. Don't just say it. Prove it.
Thank you, Margaret. Josh? Can start whenever.
So when I was at school, one day, this was last year, but we had a field trip to Rock and Jump, and so everyone knows how there is an upstairs where you can get soda and all that, but now it's called Madhouse, and I already had soda, and I went to get a cover and a straw, and this one kid named Jermaine, who is still bullying me this year, he pushed me away from the covers and straw because he said, you need to go to the back of the line. I'm like, no, I need to get a straw and a cover right now because I don't have a cover on my soda. So then we got into a fight and escalated. It escalated and escalated and escalated until it got to the point where I had to leave. And this is not okay. And on Friday, like my mom said, I got punched in the face for no reason, but I'm going to give you more details. So at the end of the school day, I went to my locker, went downstairs, went outside to see if my mom was there to pick me up for horse therapy, and she wasn't. And so I went into the cafeteria when all of a sudden I feel a punch right here, and I have to like literally protect my head and stay like this on the table because he's punching me so hard that I started crying because I didn't like it, and it's gotten to the point where I had to call him names over names over names. And another time, Rufus blew snow in my face, and I thought it was playfully. I thought he did it playfully, and so I threw dirt at him, but he didn't like it. So he got a shovel, scooped up some dirt, threw it literally at my face, and it got all over me. It could have gotten in my eye, and I could have gotten seriously hurt because that shovel could have slipped out of his hands, and it could have cut me. And so we need to do something about these kids because usually I'm the only one in the school. I'm the main person to get bullied in the school, okay? And I don't like it because every single time I walk past those kids that bully me, they say something about me. They laugh at me. They look at me in a mean way. They give me looks. Even my mom's heard it. They've closed the door on my mom. They've closed the door on me. One time last year, Joel's kept hitting me on the head for no reason. I was sitting in front of him. He kept going like this on my head, right here. And I didn't like it, so I picked up my sweater and I hit him with it. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Martha. Can you move the... Yeah, do you got it? Great.
I got it, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm here today to express my support for in the budget for special education funding, more specifically for the allocation of support staff in the MMSD classrooms. Now, last time I was here, I spoke of the positive role that an extra staff member has played in my daughter's education. Additional support was not something I was offered with ease, even in my daughter's contributory documentation. And in fact, after 3 IEP meetings, one was specifically regarding SCA to student ratios, I was denied any extra support staff at first. Now, and I will always be an empowering advocate for my daughter as long as she needs me to be, which is why immediately after receiving my final phone call denying my request, I actually spoke with my daughter's 5K teacher right away and told her that I was going to be volunteering my time in the classroom until I was satisfied that my daughter was participating and understanding the classroom etiquette and instruction. It was only after that I informed the principal, who ended up reaching out even further, that additional sports staff was actually added to her classroom day, and so I no longer needed to fill that role. And there's no question through her teachers and therapists that the additional one-on-one instruction within her classroom right now has helped my daughter grow academically and socially. If we want to be striving to have inclusive classrooms, we need to have adequate support staff to accommodate the needs of our students. It should not be so difficult to have more individualized SEAs within the classroom. Another area of attention I've been trying to work with is the 4K to 5K transition experience, as I've been trying to, for 2 years now, to find the main reason for the disconnect between my daughter's placement prior to 5K and the IEP transition team. To date, none of my LEAs have come across as a supportive individual in any of the IEP meetings that I have been involved in. In fact, I would suggest that the IEP team is lacking a participant, a parent support advocate. In my world, it would be offered through MMSD because the IEP process it's beneficial, but it's also overwhelming and it's very difficult to navigate when you're one parent coming into a group of 14 people. Those are two specific and personal stories where staff would be definitely beneficial for everyone involved, both with a primary focus on the needs of the student. Now, I would appreciate it. MMSD needs more classroom support staff within its resources to accommodate the needs of all its students. I urge you to allocate proper support within the budget to help our special education program thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Iris Hengst. Thanks, Nikki.
Good evening. My name is Iris Hengst, and I've been working as an SEA for the past 6 years at La Follette and proposed recently an injury protocol to the district. I speak a little slower due to English being my second language, and I'm speaking up because I received a blow to my head from a special education student, which resulted in a concussion and me missing 2 months of work. He would not have escalated to this level if we would have had sufficient SEA supervision. We need more SEAs at our schools. Since students are left unsupervised, SEAs are getting assignments they had no time to read up on, and teachers are tied up in, I heard before as well, I support the same point, in individual caretaking, not being able to teach their classes. And I've been told over and over, SEAs are the heart of our special education programs. SEAs put all their attention, love and care into supporting students to their best ability and knowledge. SEAs are the heart of our special education programs. SEAs are implementing the IEPs and are therefore the most likely target for possibly violent behavior and are not, and are at a high risk of injury. SEAs are particularly because of that at the heart of our special education programs. But if I twist my ankle, if I get attacked and insulted, or receive a concussion alone in a hallway or alone out in the community, I'm instructed to call a nurse on my phone and to make sure to fill out the paperwork for the district. Calling a nurse at a health clinic will actually delay real help to get my things figured out. So, it will not get me first aid. It will not get me my nonverbal, possibly aggravated and stressed student off the busy road into safety, calmed down, and to work or back to school. It will not get a teacher informed. It will not get the nonverbal, possibly aggravated and stressed student to class. It will not get my personal contact on the phone to decide if I should see a doctor, if I should go home, or I should stay at school. It will not get my help with the administrative paperwork to fill it out and to get it delivered in timely fashion. Are SEAs at the heart of our special education programs? Trauma hits hard and fast and can easily lead to unreasonable decisions for oneself and others, which we shall strive to avoid at all costs in respect of safety foremost for student and staff. If we want to put meaning to the words, SEAs are at the heart of our education programs, we need to commit to providing them with at least a clear plan of action to get help to them as soon as possible and to take the responsibility for the student out of their worry so they can start focusing on their own needs in moments of hurt and stress. The system should care for their safety first when designing the IEP plans and make sure they will always have support right away available without exposing the student or SEA to any more harm. They deserve reliable support to take over responsibility for a student where need is. I suggest to create 2 separate injury protocols for in-school and out-of-school injuries. I suggest to appoint 3 administrative positions at each school. I suggest all 3 will be prepared to follow up with the injured person to make sure first aid will be provided, personal contact will be contacted, paperwork will be filled out as soon as appropriately possible. Head injuries, after all, should be looked at in a particularly serious manner and should always be recommended seeing a doctor. Now I would feel more comfortable saying SEAs are at the heart of our special education programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the end of our public appearances. Thank you to everybody. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from September 17th, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Imad, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. All right, so we have several items on the agenda tonight, really 2 parts. The first part is focused on the budget, and the second part focused on a couple of different policy items. So Kelly, I don't know who is joining you, but just a bit of an update on where we stand with the budget.
Hey Barb, can we get the...
Hey James, are you online? Or can you hear us? If you can hear us, can
Yes,
you...
I'm
All right,
here.
all right, cool. Thanks.
There we go. All right. We're ready to go. Thank you for having Lisa and I here tonight. Our objectives are on the presentation slide in front of you. As a quick kind of reminder, we're in February, and we've had some really good conversations around the budget planning process so far. This meeting's going to feel just a little bit different in that our objectives tonight are primarily to give you and the public an update on where we are. So that we're not asking for a lot of directional feedback or decisions tonight. It's an update, and when we do get to March, there'll be time for a lot more process and decision making. So I kind of want to preface that with the upcoming conversation, which is then predicated in our timeline. So tonight we're doing updates on staffing projections and the workbook release that was released on Thursday of last week. When we come back together in March, we'll be doing a much deeper dive on where we are on the strategic equity projects, following through on some of the conversations from January, along with what central office repurposing will be needed to fill any gaps that those investments would create in our budget. In addition to that, the HR team will be here to give you an update on our healthcare negotiations with our healthcare providers. Our HR team is hard at work on those negotiations right now. Lisa's team and my team are hard at work trying to solidify those priority projects and identify areas for repurposing right now. So that'll be some good work to do in March. All heading towards the April draft preliminary budget book release at the end of the month. So this is our budget planning approach slide. You've seen this before. We're at the 3rd bullet. That's our step along this way. So we've just released the staffing workbooks and moving on in March. Our budget goals we talked about in January, along with our budget parameters, which is in the next slide. The feedback we received from the board based on that discussion have been embedded into these slides. As Lisa's team, Deirdre's team, and my team are all working very hard behind the scenes, these are the goals and parameters of which we're working within. Our work tonight is primarily based in the top 2 bullets goals. That's where our focus is of these various goals. For the first, distributing equitable use of resources to support students with the highest needs, a goal of the work. And number 2, reduce the number of sections above maximum, below minimum, with the primary focus of making sure we're within the class size policy guidelines. On the guiding principle side, we keep all of these in mind while we're working and aim to meet all of them. Tonight, our focus has been to ensure stabilities in schools, a main guiding principle for us as we're working on the workbooks. So to give you an update and kind of a reminder on where we are in the overall budget strategy process, back in January, we spent some time talking about revenue. At that point, we did agree to build in kind of a $0 per pupil categorical aid increase as our estimate of where our budget might end up. We also decided we would build in $100 per pupil on the revenue limit authority. After you take out about $1 million in our estimated impact from the 2X charters and vouchers, it was a $9.7 million increase in revenue. That's where we are on our budget estimates, and that's where we'll be holding until we get more information from the state. Kind of just continuing to tick down those boxes. On total compensation, based on the January discussion, we've built in the 2% steps into the budget estimates and a 0.5% base increase. We know that's a starting point for the board. That's where we have built in for now until we get more information from the state on our revenues. On the staffing plan, where we're at with what we released on Thursday is a less than 1% reduction in overall staff in the workbooks themselves, and that is driven by the enrollment reductions that we've been discussing. The last 3 boxes are all the work that is in process for the next month to 2 months. Again, that's deciding on the final strategic priority actions and any of the required budget allowances amongst our senior leadership team, and then identifying that gap, which is at this point we start at $3 million and work those 2 levers to identify both the repurposed actions to fund the gap and anywhere where we might be able to restructure any required allowances or bring down the strategic priority actions to balance those 2 items. And again, that'll be the work in March. Our HR team is hard at work for the employee benefits plans. We continue to keep $2.5 million built into the budget to fund that plan. Kate, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, let's just go to the end and then we'll take comments then.
So you've seen this slide before. This is our student enrollment slide. We've got the 250 students decline that we've seen to date, along with the 67 students that our enrollment projections are telling us we would likely not see for the 19-20 school year. So that total is what's built into the workbook. That comes directly off of our enrollment projection reports, which, as a reminder, year after year has been incredibly accurate. We've been within a 1% margin of error since we first started doing this 5-6 years ago. That's at the district level, which is where our workbooks are at. We do know that there's a lot of changes at the school level, and it's a lot harder to predict school level, just for one, because of our mobility across the district, which is why we have processes built into place between now and June to keep an eye on schools, use unallocated or move staff as needed, and another process between June and the beginning of September to make those continued changes. So we're right on track for that work. You've also seen this slide before. This is our staffing and allocation slide. On my left-hand side, that's the school workbooks. That's what we're talking about tonight. The school workbook is what goes out middle of February. That's all of our regular education teachers, DLI, and all of our student services are built into those workbooks. That's about 75% of our staffing model. We're in the process of doing the central office allocations. That process finishes more like mid-March after that operation work group happens in March. As a reminder, in the central office allocations, there are school-based positions. All of our custodians are in that my right-hand column. For example, the advanced learner specialists are in that. So there are school-based positions that get allocated out of that right-hand corner, and that's the work that's not yet completed. And you've seen this slide, the internal allocation process. We've gone through all of these steps at this point that we talked to you back in the late fall. We have released the workbooks, and just today, Lisa's team has started the work of meeting with principals in our feedback sessions, talking about instructional design, problem solving where needed, and then 2 weeks from now, we'll start the chief's review and the ultimate approval process. So this slide is a slide that you saw back in January. The yellow boxes have been what was updated since the last time you saw it, based on the enrollment projections and the other estimates that were built in. So we are at 27.5 FTE school staff reductions in the workbooks. And then based on those conversations, the special ed and the student services are up the 17 positions that we've been discussing with the board for the last few months. The rest of the assumptions remain the same, and as I mentioned, the work on those continues. So just to dive a level deeper, to give you a little more insight here, where we're at, overall is a less than 1% reduction in staff, and that is driven by the enrollment numbers. And you can start to see that evidenced out in that last year, the 18-19 school year, we were at a 9-to-1 total staff to student ratio at this time of year, and now we're at 9.3-to-1 total staff to student ratios in schools. So we're really right there in the same zone. It's because we've had to account for the enrollment reduction that's largely driving the differences in staff. And you'll see those largely at the elementaries. That is where our 2X charters are recruiting from. It is where our vouchers tend to pull our students from. And unallocated, we have regular education and special education built together for this year for a total of 14. The reason for that is this is actually the first year that we're using local funding to support the unallocated for special education. We've discussed this with the board in the past. We have used IDA flow-through as unallocated in the past, and as IDA flow-through starts to shrink on us, that's not something that we can sustain. So pulling from local to support unallocated from special education is kind of a necessity starting for this year. Do you have anything to add, Lisa? Did I miss anything?
No, I would just say that also around elementary, we tried to sort of level set there in terms of minimizing the number of sections that were below the sort of the floor for class sizes. So that could be where some of the numbers come in there too. That also includes specials, right? Because class sizes in schools also include some specials allocation. And then just my own 2 cents on the unallocated and local and IDEA. And some of you have a deeper knowledge of this than others, but the IDEA carryover obviously has been dwindling every year. IDEA is in place to fund the supplemental needs of special education. And as much as possible, if we can be fiscally responsible and fund positions out of local that are reimbursable, that's what we want to do, to avoid using IDEA flow-through. So just that background, and I think that we've done better this year about that. And Kelly, thank you for foreshadowing that with the group.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, this is just highly technical stuff, and I think that we'll kind of lose track if we don't. Kelly, I think, saw me wake up when she started talking about the IDEA flow-through changes. And I just want to make sure that I'm careful, that I'm clear on my understanding of the past few years and the practices we've had and where we're at now and kind of comparatively. My understanding is that I think it is 2 years ago we let the surplus build more than we had in the past. This year's budget, we are deliberately spending down the surplus more than we have in the past. And then I guess kind of comparatively, what does next year's budget look like? I guess that's kind of the third place that we kind of had kind of a steady stream that we were, that we were kind of like keeping the surplus at a certain level because it's what 36 months you can spend and blah blah blah. So I guess we're compared to the last 2 years and the third kind of steady that went before. What's next year?
So I guess for let me see if I can answer this, and I might need to get you some information after the meeting. But we make adjustments in special education at any point during the year for limited term needs, for unexpected fluctuations in student enrollment. Oftentimes those limited term sort of mid-year changes, those are made through flow-through, right? Excess costs of special education. That's where we'll pull that from. And we always make sure that we have a nice, robust pot of money in there to do that versus nice, robust, I know is sort of, I suppose, relative according to what we all want. I saw your eyebrows go up there, TJ. But we just want to be sure that we're able to make time-limited adjustments out of IDEA, and I can connect with John around what exactly that might look like, but we just want to be sure that we're healthy enough there that we can make those time-limited adjustments.
So there'll still be some there in addition to
For
the
sure.
unallocated?
Absolutely.
And for the adjustment?
Absolutely. I think one year we had a lot in there, it dwindled down, we spent it down. We're trying to take sort of a more thoughtful approach around where reimbursements happen and what gets taken out of IDEA.
And what level we keep as
Yeah.
the bank for the future?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Kate, for allowing that little,
Yeah, no
that
worries.
little side
You're
trip
good. You're good.
into
All right.
geekdom.
All right, keep going, guys.
Oh, gosh, it's my turn. Okay. So this is just an overall sort of summary of how the elementary workbooks have been designed. So you saw the enrollment-related reductions at the elementary level and minimized to the extent possible at the low end, at the above end also in the workbooks. As a reminder, it is really, really early in the allocation process. We did our very best to right-size the schools around the optimum number in the policy, the target for schools. We also did a hand look at the workbooks to look at where projections and actuals were hugely different. And there are some places where they were hugely different, and we made adjustments. I mean, principals are real about that. I do know also that there were some areas where we're not quite a match yet, and that we're going to watch. It's very early, and we're going to watch, and we have those sections targeted. But all in all, we have fewer sections below and above what we established in our class size policy, and we were still able to staff for general education and DLI what we feel are very appropriate class size within the policy that we have. At the secondary level, just a reminder, that secondary flex pool that middle school teachers have to assign to core content areas was aimed at an optimum level of 25 students per section. So we feel really good that we were able to preserve that for middle schools with adjustments made for enrollment. So if enrollment went up, we added. If enrollment went down, we took away proportionally. Also, the big win that is bolded up there is this access to middle school world language. You know, we did that last year, and we did it working with schools to ensure 2 languages were taught, and they were taught with the appropriate amount of minutes so that students could articulate to that level 2 course as freshmen. And we're able to continue that, and we feel really good about that. And just wanted to be sure that that you recognize that, and our principals recognize that, so we can get that staffing set up right for access and participation for all of our students. At the high school level, we aimed our flex pool there at an average of about 28 students per section at the high school level, again adjusting for enrollment. And we supported the expansion of pathways at 3 of our comprehensive high schools with repurposing from within that flex pool and within other allocation in the workbook. And then our targeted staffing strategies, we just wanted to be sure that that you had an eye on the approach to this. The first 2 bullets that you see are the $1.5 million in additional investments that we're proposing and added to the workbook for special education, psychologists, counselors, and social workers. Just wanted to let you know we've maintained the same ratios, again, based on enrollment for supplemental staffing for our ESL BRT needs in schools. We've maintained advanced learning FTE. The slide that Kelly showed you, we also just want to say that we know schools plan for the allocation for advanced learning, and we have put that baseline out there, the same as last year for PSTs and advanced learning. Any changes in that allocation would come through our priority action process, which will occur over the next couple of months. And then we maintained the AGR contracts with reduced class sizes at the early grades to maintain those sizes as specified in the policy as well. So just a summary around special education staffing and our investment around supporting students with disabilities. And this is a summary of the memo that was shared with the board. This is the exact same numbers that are there, but to give it its due recognition, we are implementing the weighted student formula pilot in one of the attendance areas, the memorial attendance area. We have gotten great feedback around the potential with this. I met with a couple of schools today in the feedback session, and they're feeling really good about that. So the formula, when applied to that area, generated 6 FTE in addition for schools in that area. And remember that 6 FTE was put in the flex pool. for special education. So principals in conjunction with our special education department are looking at how best to allocate that, either teacher or SEA in the building based on student need. So there is school flexibility around that. We've built in some additional unallocated in local, like I said before, to address unanticipated needs. Could be in the pilot area, could be in other areas. But that we want to be sure is accessible based needs that come up. And then the student services additional 6.2 around psychologist and social worker. And just a reminder that that student services allocation, that is also based on counting in the 504 plans in allocation and also homelessness. That factor is also added. Those two factors are also added as weights. So want to be sure that we address that as well. Schools not in the feeder pattern area will maintain the current system, and we maintain a current unallocated pool as well, as I said for that. Again, working with schools to provide a little bit of cushion in the allocation process so schools can get their hiring done. Last year, we had 100% of our CC teachers hired when we did this, and we felt that was a really good move so schools could get set up. The allocation does account for students in referral at the placement rate, and there are differentiated weighted student factors that contribute to additional SEA hours. I will say we are a humane institution. Literally, our little ones coming in and out in special education changes every day. So we know that we have to be flexible. We know that a list today for any given school might not be completely the same as a list with people who are actually in that school knowing their kids intimately. So we're committed to remaining flexible and listening and doing something more than just a numbers count for these schools as well, and responding when needs occur over the next couple of months, right? We want to continue to watch and monitor. Title I overview. Our grant award is about $6.5 million. We don't have it yet. Our grant usually comes out in June. We have put $5 million into the budget books this year for Title I, and our current strategy follows the continued trend. We allocate on a per pupil basis, a tiered approach using direct certification counts in rank order of poverty. And I see an error on this slide. I'm going to completely fess up. The three new elementary schools are Hegel, Marquette, and Muir. Lapham is a Title I receiving school for homeless funding. Marquette is the Target Assist Title I school, so just want to clarify that. And the new middle school is Toki.
Can you possibly explain the difference between the homeless assist and the other?
Absolutely. Yep, that's a really good question. So Hegel, Marquette, and Muir are schools that, based on January count, have a poverty level at or above the district average. We do, under federal law, have to provide Title I funds to non-Title I schools who have a significant number of students who are homeless, experience homelessness. Lapham is a school that does receive funds for that. They do draw quite a few students from shelters in that area. So it is a nod that although the school is not a Target Assist or school-wide, there are definitely needs related to homelessness that need to be addressed. So that's a really good question. We have an obligation under federal law for that as well. So the grant award for Title I, we are hoping is about the same. Because of charters, vouchers, some enrollment changes, we did see overall a decrease to schools in Title I funding, actually because of all of those pieces and the addition of 4 new schools. So we had to be really thoughtful about that, but some schools, most schools I will say, experienced a decrease in Title I funding because of the addition of 4 vouchers and charters and enrollment changes.
Can we get that chart as we've had in the past?
Yep, we will send it all your way when it's all finalized. Yep, we always do.
Is Capitol High, because we did that one thing one year where we had Capitol, where we kind of added Capitol High in the middle of the year, and so where are we at?
We did, we kept Capitol High in this year, that's correct. Capitol High was added mid-year, right, last spring. You will note that the 5.0 million that we added is a little more than last year. than what we put in because we wanted to minimize the impact of everything I just said on elementary and middle schools and capital. You'll get all of that when it's all finalized.
We're using district-wide on Title I, 1.2 million, something like that, 1.3. Maybe my memory's off, that's kind of my memory of what we've been doing in the past.
So 5 million goes into the schools and per pupil.
Schools, and then like 1.2, 1.3 district-wide.
Right, in reservations, and we always give you, we always give you the breakout. If you remember too, a couple of years ago, we had the cost of Lexia on Title I. We pulled that off. We wanted to just maximize as much as we could per pupil. Still there. Yep, we'll get you that, TJ, when it's all put together and packaged. No problem.
Go for it. We're basically at the end.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, two things. One, so the SEA isn't going down, but we're being flexible on, correct? The numbers of SEAs.
So.
Like there's not a staffing reduction at this point.
No.
That's what I meant.
The additional,
I'm phrasing it badly. And
No, that's okay, Nikki. That's okay. The additional FTE that was allocated is not allocated just for teachers. It's in the flexible pool, and schools can make decisions based on needs of kids for either SEA or CC.
Number two, is there any way listening to the parent tonight about having someone to assist on IEPs, is there like a volunteer program? Is there something we could do? I mean, I kind of was listening to that parent, the one whose kid was punched in the face and then was told it was just pushing papers to do a 3-year eval. I'm kind of really concerned if that's the strategy that's happening. How do we avoid that?
Well, just real quick on that, we'll certainly be following up with that family. I already wrote to John about it. So there's that. And I know from having met with John so many times with parents that we regularly provide advocacy information for families, so we can follow up with you. So you know what we provide information about where they can find them. We don't have them, like we don't staff them, which is I think what that particular speaker was suggesting.
Just a real quick summary, we are in phase 2 of the workbook and allocation process. The principals have done some pre-budget work. We are now engaging in cross-functional conversations with them about workbook process, categorical, FTE, and instructional design. In phase 3, the presentation and consultancy will shortly follow with decisions shared with chiefs. And then the electronic workbook. Just a reminder that we have had this in place for multiple years now. Just what's important to remember in this is workbooks represent really one point in time. And a lot can happen. The workbooks go out, and a lot can happen between the time the workbooks go out and when they get finalized, and then a great deal can also happen over the summer, right? We know people retire, people change jobs, people transfer. So just to know it's one point in the process, and we really appreciate the work that Kelly and her team have done around getting that to the best place that it can be in electronic format. It is super cool, you guys. It's got seniority dates in there, B numbers. It makes the staffing process technically as fluid and easy as possible for principals, as it can possibly be. So I'm actually really proud of it, and it is a really helpful technical tool. It is only technical, but it's really important. It's very important. So that's that. I'm going to pause, and Kate, I'm going to let you lead us into discussion.
Super. Nikki.
Just have one question. You said that the Title I aid decreased due to funding for vouchers, charters. How much did the aid decrease? Can we find that out?
We won't know until the grant comes in, Nikki. When it comes in, we always provide information with you about that. Yeah. You bet.
And just for clarification, that's largely tied to the enrollment itself, but also which students are choosing, right? So certain schools, if they're losing a number of low-income kids, they tend to fall on the title list because as a percentage basis, their low-income percentage fell. And the exact opposite could happen. If higher-income families leave, a school could rise on the title category because as a percentage, they have higher low-income percentage. So those are the changes that we're seeing happen across the system.
I'll just step in on that to begin with. Lighthouse Christian, all voucher students, so that's all low income in one sense or another. One city's low income percentage is slightly below that of the district, but it's still around 50%. And IMA's low income percentage is, I believe, 19%, well below the district. So I don't think we have a lot of worries coming from that one corner. And that's as of the third Friday counts, and the third Friday January counts may be a little bit different, but that's it. Just well, off the top of my head, a couple things. The Title I stuff. I think some clarity on. And we talked about this for this meeting about where we have the different, kind of like the staffing coming from here to there, kind of just what that represents, and perhaps maybe suggest that a projection update for the charts that appear on page 37 and 39 of the PDF of the last budget book. They're essentially the two different staffing charts. Yeah,
Equity
you know what
charts?
those. You know what I mean.
Are those the equity charts? Oh, the full staffing tables.
They're the ones that are. It's teacher staffing summary, FYI, not the equity chart.
Right.
But the summary chart, and it says school-based versus blah, 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 and then the other one has administrators, district-wide administrator,
So we'll build those into the April budget book. So much changes between now and then, which is why we produce them for the April budget book. You got it.
And then also, I guess that in a similar manner, usually by this time of the year, we have a current year equity chart, the full thing. And actually, I was on the phone with someone this weekend, and they were talking about staffing ratio, and they were using the directory information. I'm like, well, that doesn't, that's not good, right? And this is actually someone working with Schools of Hope. And I said, I can give you the equity chart from last January, so if we can get a newer one.
Yep, because workbooks were just out on Thursday. We need to get those finalized. And as a reminder, the equity charts are a very, very manual process for our team. So we will absolutely start working on it this week. And I think it'd be a good time for the board to start thinking about what that looks like in the future with the state now asking for a different level of information. We have to pull it for the state. So once we fully know and understand the state's process for pulling, it might be that we no longer need the equity charts and we can just match to the state's information.
That would be great to
right? So I don't know what that looks like yet.
And probably keep the information flowing more publicly and more regularly, and that would be great.
So just know that's on my mind. I just don't know exactly what it looks like yet.
We'll continue that conversation. I want to talk about a couple of things here. Is that number one is what I don't see here, and it's hard to say with the targeted strategy, is two things that I know are important to me and I think are important to other board members. One of them is expanding mental health services, and I understand that there's an expansion, and I can't say, well, I hope I can't say no, but I certainly applaud the idea of expanding social workers and psychologists. And if you talk to people in our schools and you talk to our social workers and psychologists, they will tell you that the needs are there and that the 0.7s and things like that are really difficult to deal with. But they will also tell you that they're not clinicians. And they will tell you that our highest need students need clinicians, and that's what the partnerships that we're doing with the mental health pieces are about. And if I had to choose about where we invested at this time, as much as I would love to see more staffing for our own social workers and psychologists, I would, if we have to pick one or the other, and I don't know if we do, but if we do, the partnerships and access for our highest need students for clinicians is really, and I think that that's my, as a single board member's opinion, that's where the need is. And then the second thing that I think is kind of that other board members have also, and as well as the ad hoc committee and others, is space in alternatives. And I don't see that in here in any real way. And I also kind of think, just kind of as an aside, as we go forward with adding space to alternatives, that we look at our alternative models, our alternative success, or alternative staffing ratio, as Michael Jones spoke today about the transition plans for alternative students. Putting students in alternatives and leaving them there is sometimes the right thing to do. But I think that that's also incredibly, amazingly expensive if you look at our staffing ratios. And so I think that if we're going to build new alternatives or build new seats, we really have to look at this idea as transitional alternatives to get students the support for the time they need in this different environment. Because again, the staffing ratios, particularly in our special education alternatives, are appropriate for the student needs and also very, very difficult to swallow from a budgetary standpoint. And so those are two things I'd really like to see built into the budget. And then because the information came late today about the further information around the special education pilot model, I think I would like to have the board have a deeper discussion of this, but a couple quick observations from what I've been able to look at in it. First off is just a general philosophical thing, is that Lisa, with various places when she was discussing the handbook process, the workbook process, I said handbook process, she talked about doing this by hand, and that's what, and I think that there's a thing where just because we can generate numbers and numbers can generate other numbers, that we think that we've done something right. And I think there's a certain point where the human touch and the human understanding really becomes very, very important. And I think that this may be the case there. The second thing around the pilot is that just some quick glances is, number one is we're doing this pilot in Memorial area. And based on last year's numbers, Memorial area schools are approximately a quarter of our district, right? About a quarter of our district. They received 52% of the new allocations if we run last year's numbers. So people are going to be happy getting more allocations. And that's not going to tell us if this model works for the rest of the district, because the rest of the district, in fact, doesn't proportionally get the same amount. And second quick glances, and it's not universal, is that it looks like our low poverty schools are gaining at the expense of our high poverty schools. And that's not it's not a straight line, but there's just kind of a pattern that seemed to emerge. Haven't had time to calculate it. But so Memorial area is gaining, low poverty schools are gaining, and middle schools are losing. And to me, just kind of the narrative I write around that is this isn't something we want to be doing, either as a pilot or as a regular model. Taking away from middle schools, taking away from high poverty schools, and bunching up in one area. So, but I think we need to have the rest of the board needs to have those documents. We all need to have them longer. I had a half hour with them. So that's final thing related to that is that if we take six new FTE as 1/4 of the district, I'd love to see 24 new FTE built into our budget for special education. And then it becomes, what do we reallocate from? If we talk about reallocating from the classroom, I think we do need to look deeply at Doyle. I think we need to look at our non-union professionals. You know, we've been up and down with our classroom staff, but our non-union professionals keep going up. I think we have to look at, last year we added 4 new assistant principals. That's $500,000. I think that we need to look at that kind of staffing. And I think we need, and I know you're looking at other reallocations, but those are just kind of off the top of my head, that these are things where we need to reallocate to priorities. And I think that and one of the things about non-union professionals is that they don't have contracts. Administrators are under contract. We have surplus rules around others. So if we want to reallocate to our priorities, they're a place to go. Final thing is that, and I'm spending money left and right here, I know, and I'm doing it unrealistically, is that the 0.5 plus steps equals CPI is something that A, I don't think we should be doing, and B, I don't think we'll get away with doing. I think that we need to have a base wage increase that is much, much closer to CPI. actual CPI, a base wage that's much, much closer. So that's my comments.
James, I want to ask if you want to comment at this point. I know there was some discussion earlier that's relevant to some of the topics we're talking about. James, you there?
Jim?
Should we try to reconnect?
All right. Maybe you can shoot him a note and see if he's still there.
I'm here.
Hey. Do you want to comment on any?
I'm just a little crazy, I think.
Do you want to make any comments, James, or should I?
Not at this time. No.
Okay. All right. Gloria.
I just have a question on advanced learning. So I see we're just going to keep it as is. We're not going to increase. I know you talked about it. Is that?
Let me clarify. Thank you for asking. So right now, we have kept that staffing for advanced learning specialists at the same level it is this year. We know that there have been recommendations made from the ALAC Parent Committee. It's in 10 different areas. We'll be sharing those recommendations with you and having a discussion at our senior leadership team about what all of those recommendations are. And then if there are any changes to the FTE or the amount of advanced learning specialists or type, that would come through a priority action ask in March.
Yep.
Moving forward.
And then the recommendations to increase staffing did come through the Department of Civil Rights as well, right? No?
The parent committee made the recommendations, which isn't, I don't think it's all parents, well, that committee, the ALAC committee.
Right, so-
It was shared with the Office of Civil Rights, but that's not
The existence of the parent committee and the fact that they would make recommendations is a part of the Office of Civil Rights process. So the process was defined through that OCR resolution, and if I'm over my skis, Matt, just.
Oh, you got it.
But the specific recommendations.
And we had an advisory committee prior. Yeah, we strengthened it based
Yeah,
on
but
the.
I mean, we did have one before OCR.
Yeah, that's true.
And we'll get those recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just finished.
I think that finalizing them in January.
Yeah, the group took one look at them, and we shared that with OCR, the first round. I know that the board got the formal update that Matt puts together that always gets shared with the board. I know all those recommendations were kind of buried in all the attachments, but they took another round at their meeting in January, just January 15th. To literally go back and go through and do some more edits. So now it's our opportunity to take a look at that and then bring anything that we might propose in March in the priority action part of the process.
All right, maybe I'll jump in. So I have a couple of comments. They're relatively aligned with some of the previous comments. I'll be brief, but just want maybe you to know where the alignment lives on the board. Maybe I'll start with the student services FTE. I had some of the same reaction as TJ around kind of 6 FTE into a quarter of the district and wanting to understand how we were going to think through the remaining 3 quarters. Understanding that there are needs out there and that while we want to learn what is the allocation method we want to learn from, but I think the sheer quantity maybe is they're 2 separate questions. So could we test allocation method but not test numbers? They're related, but what would that look like? And similar in terms of the reaction around kind of school psychologists and social workers. I guess I have a question about whether that's about $500,000 of priority actions in the budget. If that would be our first foot forward, or if it would be into more of the flex pool, into CC, SEA, or into mental health, either direction. I guess I'd appreciate our staff's feedback on that more than anything. It's not clear to me, and it's a significant 6 FTE is a significant number of staff to add, and well, I'd love to add any of them. I'd be curious what the overall recommendation on that is. And And I guess for me at least, if this is the level of where the recommendation lives at, I am going to want to add more when we get to a more formal priority action moment in the budget, whether that's focused on mental health or alternative programs. We just had an ad hoc discussion that was relatively lively around alternative programs in particular. We've set up an office, but we haven't necessarily invested in seats. I know we've talked a lot about seats, both for special ed as well as for non-special ed alternatives. And so, you know, just maybe foreshadowing, I don't think it should surprise you, but foreshadowing that I would expect to add there, which implies taking from somewhere else. I'll maybe say the same thing as TJ in terms of the CPI. I don't know where we'll land on that. I'd like you guys to continue to challenge yourself in terms of where we can pull out so that we can reinvest both in the mental health and alternatives as well as into at least nudging that base wage a little higher. I have concerns about keeping AL where it's at. Again, these are all puts and takes, so it just is giving you some maybe visibility into the puts, and I have a feeling a number of board members are aligned on some of those. The last two comments are a little different. I know we've talked about the class size under minimums. We've only got 10% of our sections in this workbook model over optimums and 0 over maximums. I would love to know the number if we pushed our 10% over optimum to 15%, 20% over optimum being the mid zone, right? Not at a maximum, not past a maximum, but if we can live for some of our schools, what do we get from that? How many more SEAs do we get? How many more mental health professionals could we create, seats and alternatives, et cetera? So I don't want you to push over maximum, but I'm curious how much value lives there if we were to push more over that median number. The policy exists for a reason, and I don't want us to treat optimum as a ceiling. Like, the ceiling is the ceiling. The optimum was supposed to be the mid zone.
Kate, on that, with how that functionally looks with the workbooks out, is what you end up doing is essentially adjusting the reg ed unallocated down because the workbooks are already out. So as other sections were to grow, you would not solve that school's problem. You would not use unallocated, right? That's how, like, functionally it would look over the next couple months. So you would essentially try to not use some of those unallocated.
I mean, is there a process between now and April to adjust where we see? I mean, we have the opportunity to adjust, to pull from some of the smaller classes into.
We do.
Right. I mean,
we absolutely do. I had an email this morning actually with some folks. Not happy with the class sizes at 4th and 5th grade. They were within the class size policy, but they were pushing the top end of it. And my response was, yep, you're within the class size policy, but you also have really small classes because of sort of, in some cases you actually can't make an adjustment, like a couple kids up or down, but I said you have really small classes down here. So if you wanted to adjust within your allocation and move or create another configuration, you could. But we also are really fair with principals around, you are right at the edge of too low. And last year we made many shifts by, I'm not saying that gleefully, don't get me wrong, but we did make shifts where we pulled and they made different combinations and we moved elsewhere. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have a ton of unallocated. We would be able to make those shifts from within.
I guess there's no answer right now.
Yeah.
It's a process for you guys, and for maybe the only answer I would be interested in, but as you go through the process so that we could give some guidance, is if we were to kind of round down differently or round up differently, is that $1 million we could reinvest into SEAs? I don't know the number, right? And that would change, I think, our guidance on that.
Yeah.
So that's the only question. You can come back on, if we landed with instead of 10% over optimum.
Let me think about that, and Kelly and I can talk a little bit about that. I will be honest and say, our workbook process the work that we've done with Intrusion to do the technical tool, we've taken it about as far as we can this year. Honestly, you guys, we've taken it about as far in terms of right-sizing class sizes, minimizing the low end, minimizing the up end. So it's, you know, we're constantly trying to think about how to make the instructional design process better, so that we're not caught in this war of the tenths all the time. So I appreciate that question, and we are trying to figure out how to next level this workbook and instructional design process so that we can get that value and get the FTE in the most important places that schools need them to be.
Are you saying that it's physically impossible to, I mean, you're saying it's impossible to have our staffing model be 5% different or 10% different for the medians, or?
No, what I'm saying is everything is so connected to each other. The classroom FTE is connected to the specials FTE, which is connected to class. Like, they're all interconnected, and just like a move in how, like, the formula that you put in to run the sections, like for elementary, even the move of one student one way or the other, there's multiple pieces. And so we actually do need to think about how we can do that, I would say more systematically, to get the biggest value for our FTE in the schools. I'm just saying that we have more work to do around instructional design in terms of next steps and improving the process. We can always go through and change the formula. Oftentimes, if you change the formula now, you end up adding back later. So yeah, it's sort of a it's a pretty big process, but I think as we continue to go through, what I hear you asking for along the way is if things would change, like if you...
I'm trying to understand, look, we can talk about central office and we can talk about NUPS as a place to get value. We know we're likely going to be over the mill rate increase that we typically want to be at going into next year. That was one of the earlier budget discussions.
No, we'll be at or around 0 mill rate. That was one of the earlier conversations.
The percent increase.
Yeah, our percent increase will be higher simply because we're spending more, but the mill rate is cushioned.
I'm talking about the increase.
Yeah, so the mill rate is what affects taxpayers.
The increase in tax rate
is the mill rate, and so that's what's estimated right now to be at or around 0, based on the fact that we're at our revenue limit.
We will collect more money, but the mill rate, because the tax base grows.
Okay.
But the mill rate, Kelly says, projects flat, and I believe her because the property growth, and we have things coming off of TIF and things like that, so I believe her.
I'm trying to create options here.
I know
so
you are.
I'm trying to create options that are outside of NUPS and Doyle because I would like to reinvest in some things that aren't on the page right now. And we've got some flexibility in the spring window. I'm curious how much value there is in some of those other options. And so I don't know how you guys find an answer to that, but I would like an answer. The last comment is really big picture, which is our enrollment's been falling for 5 years. We have not had 2X charters until last year, and I'm concerned about it. We are a well-funded district as public education districts go. It doesn't mean we have enough of anything that we want. But if we can't figure out a way to pull students into the district because we're offering something that people want more than what one of our surrounding districts wants, we have a problem. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. If this isn't all about 2X charters and vouchers, though that is certainly a contributing factor, we have to create more value for kids. And so, all right, Nikki.
I don't want to cause conflict. I don't want to cause...
Sorry, I'm very sorry.
Sorry, Mary.
It's okay. It's my job. I got sidetracked.
I'm sorry about that. Don't want to cause any problems, but I know about 2 budgets ago we did agree to have $1 million added to special ed, and some help got put in the savings, and I'm not re-arguing that. And we make sure that it goes where it needs to go.
It's built into the workbooks.
All right, Mary.
So as we look at these different areas of whether it's school psychologists or social workers, I think back to our discussion around the BEP and the changes there, and what a lot of board members voiced concerns about was the actual implementation. Is that there's really good changes there. We're looking at what is built in for schools in terms of Tier 2, Tier 3, what programs are offered, whether it's additional seats and alternatives. I really would love to see that where we're adding, it helps build out those options for our staff to understand that they can implement this, that they really feel that the support is in the schools to be able to do the work they want to do. And I think that's that is, I'd love to be able to see how that is. And I know that the clinicians, as TJ has accurately pointed out, really are the ones, but we also know it's an availability issue, and that's going to be a slower growth. I think that's, and it sounds like we're all sort of committed to that long term, but I do think in the meantime, how do these additional positions help support the real implementation with fidelity at each school of the BEP, so that it becomes a document that is not just policy, but really good practice that has the supports behind it.
That makes sense.
That was very well said.
Thank you. All right, any other budget feedback, TJ?
Yeah, just two things, kind of both in response to things that you raised. And I think that, you pushed a little bit on, can we push this at 5%? Can we change this and that? And I think that there's kind of two answers to that, is that we can run numbers to do that, but at this point in the workbook process, it becomes very, very difficult to take away and to add. And I guess, though I might not like the outcomes of pushing it, I do think that for future changes in both perhaps policy, but definitely process, that running those numbers and doing a virtual workbook kind of exercise, while this is fresh in our mind, I know that the real budget work has to go forward in a timely fashion, but I also think that we shouldn't let this go. And that we should, investigate other practices and see where they take us for the future, because these issues aren't going to go away.
Nope.
So, and again, we might disagree with whether these are good outcomes or bad outcomes that it gets it, but I think that information would be really valuable for all of us.
Yeah.
Second thing has to do with the sense of enrollments. I think that, we do talk about 2X charters, we talk about vouchers, we talk about open enrollment. I think we also need to investigate much closer the patterns of attrition in our district, that we have a steady, our third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade, well, actually not fifth grade to sixth grade, but, second grade to third grade to fourth grade. Year in and year out, we lose about 200 students, each of those transitions. Sixth grade to seventh grade, we lose about 200 students. And not every grade and every year, but this is a steady pattern if you look over the last 5-10 years, maybe at least 5, and probably 7 or 8 at least. And I do think we need to investigate that, because those are students who were once in our schools, and they're not all open enrolling. They're not all going to 2X's. They're picking up and moving, and people aren't picking up and moving back. That's the issue, because in statewide, third grade cohorts are about the same as fourth grade cohorts. In Madison, the fourth grade cohort is about 200 less students year in and year out. And it's not, so I really think that we need to look at those patterns and understand them much better. And so that's just something that.
Yeah, I totally agree, TJ. Yep. So. All right. Anything else on budget? All right. Let's switch gears.
Thanks, guys.
Matt. No, we can't keep going. This won't be too long, right? You guys have already done the policy discussion, right?
Anything after budget?
and then we got a break.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so this is a follow-on from a previous
Yes.
partial discussion.
Two policies tonight, 4147 and 4400, based upon some of the revisions to state law regarding safety and security. I'm going to refer to the summary document and to a very high level of the changes. And there are two, I apologize, there are two changes that did not make it in the final draft, and I'll discuss those shortly. I will start with 4147 first. And the one change that did not make it into the draft, in reviewing 4147, there's a reference to the district emergency procedures. Those are well-developed procedures approved by our outside. But what they don't cover is they cover injury and illness to students. They don't cover equally well injury and illness to staff members. And they also don't cover what happens when we are on a field trip, what happens when we are on a community experience with a special education student and there's an illness or injury. So one of the provisions I would, that the board approves, I would suggest adding is updating those procedures that, and so that they shall include protocols for injuries and illnesses to staff members as well as injuries and illnesses occurring outside of the school building. That was actually referenced by one of our speakers tonight as well. So that would be one change. The second change is a fairly simplistic change, just requiring that all MMSD employees who are present during an emergency will be required to act on behalf of the ill staff member or the ill student. Next change is there was a request to differentiate between the district safety plan and the school safety plan. They're very different. School safety plans are individualized to each school. The district safety plan is the overarching umbrella. So those are mainly in the headings to differentiate there.
And the student safety plan?
Right, from a specific student safety plan as well. The largest change to this policy is in relation to some concerns that presented, I believe, to the board previously about conducting school violence drills without advance notice. We have all acknowledged in there that when you conduct a school violence drill, that there will be advance notice to students, parents, and school staff. So we've added that in there, so that's very clear. So we won't have, hopefully, scared children when we do active shooter drills. Also added to that paragraph is a school violence drill can be substituted for one of the drills that's listed later on in the policy, which is a school safety incident.
Oh. Sorry. Thank you. Let's see, moving on, in terms of the...
Hey, Matt, can you emphasize what that means?
Sure.
Because there are a lot of concerns raised around traumatizing children, and I think that substitution minimizes, doesn't eliminate the potential for trauma. And so I want to emphasize that for our families, because lots of families, the recent article in The Atlantic, there's all sorts of things out there.
Right, so what we can substitute by policy, if the proposed policy is accepted, is a school violence event drill. Again, that's typically an active shooter drill, for what we refer to as a school safety incident drill. A school safety incident drill could be anything from, take some recent examples, a lava lamp shatters and some gas is released and we have to evacuate. School safety drill could be the boiler's out and the school is too cold and therefore we have to evacuate the school, versus a school violence event drill, which is, again, the active shooter drill. Now, the school safety drill is done without prior warning. A school violence event, by policy, if accepted, will have to have pre-warning.
Can I just comment on, I know I'm jumping in on my own meeting here, but the way that the fire, weather, and school safety drills is written for the additional language, I think actually would indicate school violence event drills as described above may be substituted for the drills set forth in this paragraph, but the description above says without prior warning. So.
In paragraph 3, are you talking?
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
So does that, I read that to mean that school violence event drills as described above, meaning without prior warning.
So,
whereas the
and
previous
actually that,
language
I'm
says
glad you
with-
brought that up, because it was intended for school violence drills that could have advance warning to be substituted for a school safety incident without prior warning. So I can certainly clarify that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to read this and think it's in disagreement with the previous page,
Okay,
which is
all
quite
right.
clear.
All right, thank you
Because
for
this to
noting
me
that.
says you can do it one way with advance warning and one way without advance warning.
And the intent was to be able to substitute a drill with it.
Understand,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm good with the intent. I
Okay.
think just the specific language is a little unclear.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving back a little bit further up the policy, that there is a requirement that a school violence event drill is required to be reviewed by the board, and there was a request to have that review placed on a board agenda. That I just want to note that would be 53 different, reviews of. So I don't know if we want that on an agenda or through an update, but that's for the board to decide. Because that would, again, it would be 53 different.
Can we actually decide that now so you can come with a clean version?
Sure, yeah.
What do people, do we want this on an agenda or no? TJ?
I guess that I'd like to know the statutory requirements of review.
Mhm.
And I guess that's my only, that was why I suggested it, because if review means the board collectively, then the board has to affirm that we reviewed it collectively, in which case it has to be an agenda. It doesn't have to be an agenda item that actually gets discussed. It can be a consent agenda item. But if statutes would allow review to be something that was put in our inbox.
What's your guidance, Matt?
So I'm just going to read, it's a brief written evaluation, so that's what the schools have to do. And the requirement of the board review is school board shall review all written evaluations submitted under this paragraph.
He means read it.
Is
So,
that your interpretation? Is that?
I mean, I don't think.
Matt, are you comfortable with a
The brief evaluation is after a school violence event.
I can speak to it.
Sure.
So last semester, when they did their first semester Code Red drills, we created a Survey Monkey, just 3 short questions that all the schools that completed theirs, about I believe at the end of January, we submitted, Karen Kepler did in that document to you what those evaluations were. And then we have a few that need to be submitted yet, but basically our plan is I think the statute's once a year. We plan to do Code Red drills or active threat drills twice a year, once each semester. And there's a short 3-question Survey Monkey that we put together, and we put that into a PDF file, and we just plan to give it to you, and that's it. Pretty short and simple.
Is your guidance that a weekly update would be acceptable, or
I
consent
don't,
agenda?
it's not an action item, it's not something that needs to be acted upon, so therefore I interpret review as just that, the board has reviewed. So I don't think it would require a board agenda item.
Fine.
Then let's go without that
Okay.
additional language.
Okay.
We can always add it to an agenda if
Yeah.
there's something
We-
in there that we want to discuss, but.
We had extensive discussion about that in our policy committee, and then I realized that you'd be reviewing 53 on stage, and that
Thank you for
may not
realizing
be.
that, Matt.
Okay, and that's it for 4147. Those are the changes for 4147.
Any commentary?
Thank you for the work.
Yes, thank you very much. And for working around my crazy schedule.
So I'm going to say out loud the thing I said to you previously here, which I think I'm good with, but just it should be noted, there's nothing in here about what format communication comes in, if it's a letter, an email, a text. I was
For the advance warning.
Advance warning. I was asking in particular for student notification, in the spirit that some parents may want to actually communicate that directly to, especially little ones themselves, versus having that come from a different way. Your explanation was schools have flexibility, they're kind of in dialogue, that's fine. I think it's fine to not have in the policy. But I wanted to just raise it here in case anyone had keyed on that more.
I certainly think that a guidance document about timing of warning, how it's sent out, who it's sent
Would
out.
be helpful for schools.
Yeah.
And best practices, what good looks like essentially, which I'm sure
Okay.
you know, so.
All right. On to 4,400. The additional provision in 4,400 that I'm going to recommend is based upon a meeting I had with the general counsel for CPS just late Friday. And CPS often sends officers along with CPS workers to schools to interview children. And it's only in instances where they suspect abuse or neglect, and that abuse or neglect is being delivered by a caregiver. So that's caused some confusions in the schools, and sometimes our schools, because we have very much trained them when an officer walks into your building, pause and call, we need to think about this. CPS workers along with MPD officers have been denied access to kids when they should have been provided access to kids. So I would propose that we, and I'm going to work with CPS to some extent on
Child
appropriate
Protective Services.
Yeah,
for
Child
those.
Protective Services. Thank you. On appropriate language, but just some set out for instances when CPS is accompanied by MPD that they will be entitled to have access to students within our school buildings because of the grave nature of the reason they're there. So that would be a suggestion that I have that I will bring language back to you with.
Thank you, Matt.
Other changes to 4,400, a very brief change of adding backpack to the list of areas that can be searched, and when they are searched, that they be done so whenever possible in the presence of the student. Yep, I'm getting to that. Thank you, Nikki. We added language on consent-based searches, and just to give you a scenario, this is a scenario where a student brings a weapon to school. Oftentimes, we develop a safety plan for that student, and the safety plan will include a search provision whereby that student will be searched every time they come into the building for, say, the next semester or whatever time is deemed appropriate. So I've identified those as individualized student safety plans, and that they are only incorporated when a student has been found in possession of objects that are prohibited by school rules, board policy, or the law, and that we would need consent from either the adult student or the parent to engage in those searches. The final and most meatiest portion of 4,400 is the use of metal detectors. It's a fairly long policy. I've divided it out into as-needed metal detector screenings, which I would consider what we did at La Follette earlier in the school year, versus random screenings, which are not based upon any sort of individualized suspicion, not based upon community events, but more based upon, similar to our dog sniffing policy, where it's deterrence and detection, and that's the purposes of those. The procedures are fairly similar for both the as-needed and the random, but for differences when it's as needed, all students would be subject to those metal detector screenings, whereas the random would be, it could be every 5th student. It could be only during the lunch hour, whatever was determined to be part of that screening plan. Kate?
Do you want to finish explaining and then?
I think just a couple of more notes about the metal detection policy. I did work with our LGBTQ social worker to try and craft provisions so that all students are comfortable going through these screenings, and it's not a traumatic experience. And finally, I just wanted to add that we do have a provision in there. And Joe and I have had some discussion about this, but if there is a request for a reasonable accommodation based upon a disability, that after review of that request, a parent or a student or a visitor could be excused from the screening if it was required based upon ADA reasonable accommodations. That's, I think, the bulk of what I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
One question.
Sure.
Since we don't have metal detectors, could we put it just one?
So we had that in our Yep, we had that committee discussion, and right now, the policy is set up as handheld wand metal detectors. I originally had either standalone and wand metal detectors, but then the committee's recommendation was that right now we don't have the standalone walkthrough, we just have handheld, so let's have it match reality. And if the board so chooses to invest in walk-through metal detectors, they can do so at a later time, and we can revise the policy then.
I don't feel strongly about whether including them now or later. I mean, certainly that, I guess, ever so slightly is that if we do ever install them, I think we will need to incorporate them into this policy. And maybe we want to make some changes. And so I just, kind of want to make sure that that everybody knows that if an order went through for a rental or a purchase, that comes with a policy change, because the last time we got caught a little off guard and didn't have policies in place. So that's, but I've got another issue, which is towards the end of the metal detectors, B and C, number 4. Number 4 ends with the sentence, an SRO may also be present and assist with the screening. I'm okay with an SRO being present. I'm not okay with an SRO assisting. And I think that any assistance from police, from a law enforcement officer, should be pushed to at least paragraph 6, C6 and B6 and C6, where once the detector has been activated, and that the general assistance, when they're just doing the random screening, that the SRO should not be assisting in that. And so that's a small change that I'd ask for, that an SRO may assist once a metal detection device has been activated.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, sure.
TJ, I agree. And what clarity needs to be is that if the metal detector is detected and we're commencing a search for a firearm,
then they may assist, right, exactly.
That needs to be done by the police officer, because our staff will not search for a firearm.
I don't want, but I just don't want the SRO wanding the kids.
Yep.
I don't want the SRO.
Right, absolutely.
And telling them to go over in that direction.
Yep.
That's the part I don't want. So that's, I think we're on the same page, Jeff.
Yep.
So.
Gloria?
I have a question. I'll go back to the SRO. But, so the screenings, the school-sponsored events? Games.
The only one event that I can think of where I believe there was wanding was a large concert that was held at one of our high schools, and it was actually done through our MSCR rental policy, where we did not actually do that screening for wanding.
I think there was wanding done at the LaFollette homecoming last year.
Okay,
because
at the homecoming.
It was contemporaneous to the whole community incident that was going on, but that was actually at the request of the homecoming committee that was done.
And so where is that in here, in the policy?
So under C, as needed screenings are screenings conducted to address particular safety concerns, such as recent violence in the community, or in response to an event in which additional security is required. That's how I was interpreting that.
Response to an event.
Yep. And we could clarify that if you had some suggestions or.
I don't know what a response to an event is.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got some language, Gloria, that Matt and I are kind of talking about this, but Matt uses the word as needed screenings. In my mind, and maybe you can relate to this, exigent circumstances is a legal term that speaks to an emergency situation requiring swift action to prevent imminent danger to life or serious damage to property. And to me, what we're talking about here really is an exigent circumstance that is created because of something in the community that we are stepping in and we are implementing this safety measure right now because it's necessary.
That makes I know it's not like her, but that makes a lot of sense. Cool.
And then just to get back to the SRO, I mean, I didn't have any problem with that language. I think that having an SRO be present and assist with the screening, I don't see an issue with that. So I disagree, TJ. I'm just confused on where you want it then.
If the wand detects something, then the SRO's assistance, I'm perfectly okay with. I don't want the SRO handling the wand. I don't want the SRO putting the kids in line. I don't want the SRO performing those functions.
So if the metal detector goes off,
Then the SRO. I've said that 3 times
where
now.
the SRO,
And if I can speak,
I needed clarification, TJ, that's why I'm asking the question.
so when we did, Gloria, when we did the 2 days at La Follette last year, what we did was we had the police officers, we had 4 people at each door doing the wanding, and behind them, we had 2 police officers. And in the event, and we never actually had it happen on either day we did the screening, that if we reasonably suspected that we may have a weapon on said student when we're conducting that search with the metal detector, at that point in time, staff would have turned, contacted the officer, and at that point moved to a private location, and we'd take and conduct a further search for the weapon. Okay? That never happened, screening 1,600 students on 2 different days at La Follette. But that is how the process, in my mind, would play out.
So you would have an SRO present?
And behind school staff, and the school staff is actually conducting the
So I
wanding.
think the language that I would propose is that we take out assist with screening.
Just be present at the screening?
I had monitor, when I would monitor the screening process from
I
behind.
guess I just don't feel comfortable if we don't have an SRO and there is and somebody's armed, that we have to look for an SRO.
Does it say it's already there, isn't it? That was how I read it.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that sentence is, an SRO may also be present.
Are you concerned about the may part of it, and that it's mandatory that they be there in case there is a reasonable suspicion of a weapon? Okay.
I think an SRO
Okay.
should be present.
Okay.
Maybe not assist with the screening, right?
I guess that, I'd only say that if we take it to a must be present, then particularly in light of events and things like that, that it might not be an SRO. It might be a different police officer. Yeah, but I think, Gloria, I think we're on the same page, that we both want them there, and we both, and so, but I guess that's the only, thing. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, having an officer
Yeah, that's just,
want, right? But I think I think we should have an officer.
Well, and I would suggest rather than SRO, just say law enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that it covers both?
Yep.
Okay. Good suggestions.
Last comment. My only question was around some of the specificity around gender and the number of people present, and if we really felt like we would be able to comply with that all the time.
Right. That's a great question, Kate.
Because if we don't, then I would suggest it should not be in here.
Where are you at?
Your face is telling me that we're not sure that so there's 2 clauses, and they're in both the random as well as non-random. And it says, a minimum of 4 staff members must also be present, and that's in B4. And then the B5 is, when using handheld metal detection devices, students shall be screened only by staff of the same gender, or for students identifying as non-binary, the screener of the student's choice. I think the second part I'm thrilled is there, but the first part I wasn't sure is reasonable to include.
On day 2 last year at La Follette, that was something definitely we missed the ball on day 1, and we made sure that we had gender-specific lines for people to go through the second day at La Follette. So, Kate, quite honestly, we got to do a weapon screening today. I'm going to do everything I can. Even I got to pull female SSAs from other schools to make sure we got them there that day. I'm going to make sure we got them. But I do think it's important, especially if we're going to embark upon trying to do wanding for 1,600 kids at the beginning of the school day, to make sure I got adequate numbers of female and male staff there to do it appropriately is, I think, something that it's good for us to strive for.
And when do you train all of those people? When is the training? I mean, the training that's described here.
Well, there'll be more training on this. We kind of did it on the fly last year because we had to.
Okay.
Okay, but this will be built into training as we move into the next school year.
Okay. So your guidance would be to keep that language in here.
I think it's a
and
good goal for us to
work
strive
meet
for.
it.
I really do. But you're right, it does,
I'm just, for
You know.
for staff present for, at all Wandings.
Was there four
is-
staff presence?
we had two lines. We had two guys on one side, and we had two female SSAs on the other, and that's how we did it. One did the
But you're
backpack.
thinking
one-
of the full school event, whereas this is for random searches. I'm imagining that's a smaller scale event where you're going through the hallway and kind of, I don't know, I mean, I'm imagining for the random.
You want to define for random?
I'm just thinking.
I mean, it's a little intimidating to have four folks.
Yeah,
If it's a
but I
random
think we-
search for just a couple of kids.
Just for observational purposes and to avoid allegations later, minimum of 2.
2 seems much more reasonable to me than 4. But it's a genuine question. If you guys feel strongly it needs to be 4, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I get it for the big events. I
Yeah.
totally get it where you got a system and you're planned, but for random searches where,
Well, I think it's operational definition of what the word random is. And when we talked about random, and I remember Jen and I having a
love it when you
conversation
talk,
after
Joe.
we followed when we debriefed it, it's like random being, we're going to search everybody on a certain morning at the beginning of school, but it's going to be on the third Wednesday of next week. And then another school might be the second Tuesday of the next week. But it would be random in the sense of the days that we pick and assign the
I
days that we're going
understand.
to do it. That's the randomness. We wouldn't, like, in the middle of a school day, decide, well, there's 20 kids walking down the hallway, let's randomly, no, we're not
Okay.
talking about that.
Okay,
In
I
fact, I
understand.
think Matt's got language in it that talks about it happening at the beginning of the school day. So it's kind of a lot like the exigent circumstances kind of
Understand.
search, but it's just, we do it as more of a deterrent, kind of like we do for
for
canine
dogs.
sniffing and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
okay, I'm good. Anything else?
It even says that all students must be screened.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
or should.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Or Imad, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We are adjourned.
Matt, what's that?
Okay, so